What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. Hello, y'all. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you are here. I'm Daniel Aaron. I am your host, and this is the Art of Vibrant Living show. And as the title would imply, not so subtly, I might add, this is all about empowering you with information, with inspiration to create and live your most vibrant, thriving life. And I heard myself in my own intro there just a moment ago talking about meaning and purpose, and so important and valuable that. And our guest today, it's going to be an amazing show. He's really, I think, one of the best people to share experience in, because that's part of what he does in the world, is help people to live lives of meaning and purpose. And we will do our best to have some fun and give you some really beautiful nuggets. It's up to you, though, to take something you learned, at least one thing that inspires you, that flips a switch on for you, and apply it in your life. And if you ever want further help with that, feel free to reach out to me. And specifically on today's show, we have a great guest who can also be of great assistance. So we'll get to that in a bit too, how you can reach him. Him being Dave Orton. And Dave is really an extraordinary man and coach with a background in business, with a lot of world travel, a father of 4, 2 at home, 2 out in the world. He's made the switch, I think, about 10 years ago into the realm of coaching. And as you know, this is one of the most beautiful and important professions on the planet. Not that I have any bias since I'm a coach, but I'll tell you, it's such powerful, beautiful work. And Dave's really one of the luminaries in that world. So super lucky to have him. Grateful that he is with us today. Dave Orton, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Exactly. Characteristic victory. There we go. He's on the show with us.
I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. This is such a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, likewise. And so I have the slight advantage of knowing you a little bit, slight advantage over our audience, and knowing some of what's extraordinary about you. Though, would you be up for sharing a little bit of who you are? What brought you to this point? You've clearly developed yourself a lot, and I often say with coaching, great to study, great to have certifications, but the real certification is what you've developed in yourself, what you've overcome in yourself, how you have transformed yourself. And what I know about you is you've done a lot of that. So would you share a little bit of your journey just to give the audience an idea?
You bet. Thank you. So the journey of self-development with me began when my mother handed me a book when I was quite young called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I was not a great communicator when I was young. And so she gave me that book, and it changed my world, helped me discover interest in other people, and I have fell in love with people back very early. And I also knew that I enjoyed the spotlight. I enjoyed having attention. I do love the sound of my own voice too. So there's that going for me, which may not help in the realm of being with others. But from there I moved into the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the Covey sort of planning and leadership world. And from there, I did some things with, I did a set of cassette tapes that I borrowed from my dad, Release the Giant Within from Tony Robbins back in about 1997, I think, and have I did work with a guy that was on The Secret that I mentioned earlier, a gentleman by the name of James Ray, and until he was until his company kind of went down the drain, and then I paused for a bit until I came across this thing called the Best Defensive Lineman in the NFL, which was my first introduction to Steve Hardison, and I was so moved by that when I saw it that I immediately emailed him. It was like my fingers did it on their own. Like, do I want to do this? Yes, we're going to do this. And Steve sent me back immediately, like within 5 minutes, this nice little email saying, keep going, you're doing great. And then about 5 minutes after that, he sent me a message saying, here's my phone number, call me. So I called him, shocked to call him, shocked to talk with him. And that conversation was life changing, changed the vector, the direction of my life. He invited me to come and have a Be With session next time I was in Phoenix, and at that point, when I showed up, so I have the same religious background as Steve, so because of that, I showed up in a way that I thought a important Mormon guy would want me to show up, and he quickly informed me that that was quite inauthentic. His exact words were, "Dave, you're the most pretentious SOB I've ever seen in my life." But the way he said it blew my socks off. It wasn't like saying, "You're a freaking idiot because you are so fake." He was smiling, laughing, and saying, "I love you. Now drop the act and let's have a real conversation." And that conversation, I'm so grateful for that conversation because it set me on a completely beautiful path of aliveness. The last thing he said to me was, "Get yourself into the Landmark Forum as quickly as you can." There was a little bit of editing there, but I went and did that, the Landmark Forum, and worked with Landmark as an introduction leader with Landmark for 7 years. And that was when I started coaching. Actually, was coaching for fun and for the joy of seeing people's lives expand. And my first client was my cousin, for free and for fun. And that was 10 years ago. I continued my job in technology until 2016 when I was let go from that. And I had no idea that I had my identity so conflated with my job description at that point. When that was gone and I couldn't immediately replace that job of being a site manager with a tech company, I went into a pretty deep experience of clinical depression. And I tried to serve my way out. I tried to eat my way out. I tried to work out my way out. I tried to pray my way out. I tried to worship my way out. I tried to do all these things to get out of depression. And we became dependent on family, church, and government to subsist. My dear sister, she sponsored a chocolate chip cookie agreement with Steve for me. And I went to Steve and I'm like, "Steve, I am depressed as can be. Can you please wave a magic wand and just make it all better?" And he said something to the tune of, "You can count on that we will not be doing that." And we didn't. I remained depressed the entire time I was working with Steve. But what we did do was Steve helped me to discover the divine greatness in me, depressed or not, and helped me discover self-love, not self-conceit, not arrogance, but genuine divine love of self, which I discovered. I didn't know this at the time. I can only love others as deeply as I love myself. I can only love God as deeply as I love myself. I can only love my wife as deeply or as authentically as I love myself. And whether that's a teaspoon or a gallon or an ocean of love, that magnitude is limited to how much love I have for me. And I love me. And I'm not trying to say that I'm any better than anyone else, but man, I am. This year I've had these 3 statements, and I think you may have heard me talk about them, Daniel, on some of the other calls we've been on, but there's nothing I could do that would make me unworthy of the love of God. There's nothing I could do that would make me unworthy of loving me. And as a possibility, there's nothing anyone else could do that would make them unworthy of my love. And that third one is that way because sometimes it's hard for me to love Vladimir Putin. Sometimes it's hard for me to love the situations that are happening for anyone that's suffering in war-torn areas of the world, Ukraine or Israel, or the places in Africa that we're not really hearing all that much about. Um, and it's but the love of self has been that opened up an entire world for me, Daniel. I mean, and when I say I love you, and I can say that to people and mean it from the depth of my soul, what I mean is that it's kind of like the namaste statement. The divine in me, the divine spark in me acknowledges, sees, appreciates, and loves the divine spark and potential over there in you. And so from that perspective, it's totally authentic. Some people, it's like, well, you don't know me, therefore you can't love me. And okay, whatever. That's your choice, and I love you. So that's been my path through self-development. As far as certifications go, I did get certified as an NLP practitioner a few years ago. That's been fun. I've been trained in a bunch of different modalities, although I'm not a certified coach because I find, that doesn't really do anything. If you go online and get a $7 coach certification, good for you. That's not going to help anyone. So I'm very much invested in the difference that I can make with people. That's where the value is of my life. And I've dedicated my life to I have a statement in my constitution, my document, if you will, which is that I am a divine warrior for that everyone elevates their beingness. Now, that's another way of saying that is that everyone elevates their consciousness or their self with a capital S. But that's who I am in the world. And some days are better than others. Like I had a cold, I felt pretty crappy last night. I couldn't sleep. So I went downstairs and sat in a chair and took some medicine and turned on Gaia. I don't know if you're familiar with that network, and listened to body hacks from a doctor that I like to listen to, Dr. Asprey, I think is his name. But and so I'm dreaming. I'm in and out of dreaming, and I'm talking with listening to this guy talk about all these ways to up-level your physicality, and it's just a beautiful thing. So I'm here, I'm present, and I'm loving you, Daniel, for the difference you make in the world, and particularly in the difference you make in the Ultimate Coach Facebook group and the Being Movement. So thank you, and it's great to be here. And that's a lot of talking. Anything you would love to ask or say or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing all of that. There were some important points in there. So I will pause a little bit to echo some of what you said. I got a couple questions for you, and I want to clarify a couple things for the audience, so to make sure that they're understanding some of what we're talking about in case it's not familiar. Firstly, though, I love the beginning of your experience, your mom giving you the Dale Carnegie book, right? And your chuckle around, I wasn't the best communicator. And I can relate to that. I remember, I was not that young. I was in my 30s, and I learned about Asperger syndrome, and I was like, "Ooh, that could be me, man." I've got a lot of I have some really basic social skills that are lacking, and I wasn't quite to the level of dysfunction that we think of as on the spectrum. However, I assiduously avoided that book, right? How to Win Friends and Influence People, because I had this preconception, oh, well, that's just selfish manipulation, right? And I love what you said. What you got from that book was it taught you how to have another level of interest in other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, and I eventually did read that book, and I was like, oh my God, how did I not read this before? And it's just so the opposite of what my preconception was. So I rank it up there with some of the most beautiful spiritual books in the world, because it really teaches us it's about the other person. And if you break it down on a high spiritual level, well, there is no other person. That's us anyway. So, of course you want to have an interest in them. So I love that was a big part of your journey. And And the Covey book also, that was an early one for me. And I struggled with that one because I thought, oh, this is another, book about manipulation and getting ahead in the world. And, I was kind of anti the man at that point in my life.
Hmm.
And again, it blew me away. I'm like, that's so not what I thought it was. Um, so thank you for that. And then let's rewind a minute because you spoke about, well, definitely want to come back to your experience of recognizing how much your identity was connected to that previous job and the experience. And I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability in sharing that. And I think there's some really valuable gems there that we can uncover, because you and I are not the only people in the world that have had those kind of fall downs, right?
Hmm.
So everybody can relate to that, whether it's from a job or something else. And let's go back to Steve Hardison, you mentioned, and in case people are not aware of who Steve Hardison is, because he's not been someone that's put himself out into the limelight very much. He's referred to by others as the ultimate coach. And and there's the book written by his wife, Amy, that he didn't want to happen, but eventually allowed to happen. And thank goodness, because it's changed so many people's lives. And it's a really phenomenal expression of who he created himself to be in the world. And I love what you said about your first meeting with him. And this is such, I think, a mind-blowing paradox for so many of us, that somebody can deliver some information that would feel normally, or we would think would be hurtful, crushing,
Hmm.
insulting, and yet bring it with some level of love and acceptance, right? I go back to the amazing story of Ram Dass, right? One of my great spiritual teachers, and he the moment when he saw his guru, that he saw his guru was able to see inside him, including his judgment of the guru, and what was there for him was pure love. That blew Ram, then Richard Alpert, it blew his mind, right?
Hmm.
And so it is extraordinary when beings can see and reflect even the parts of ourselves that we might judge, and yet do it with love. So actually, before we go on, I'd love if you would share, if you're up for it, a little bit more about what happened for you in that moment, when he shared that, and you gave the exact quotation, right? Again, would be hard for a lot of people, yet it didn't come across that way to you somehow. Is that right?
Yeah, it didn't come across for me like an attack. It occurred to me as I wasn't sure what it was. Right in that moment, I was like, something shifted. It was like I wasn't sure where the foundation of my feet were. Because I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not sure where we go from here. And what the experience was very much in the realm of discovery. You know, that was right before he took me into his office and we talked, and he shared with me the sacredness of his office. He shared with me and built a listening over here with me, like how I related to being in the office with him. And um, I've been back to visit him from time to time. I was in the office when after that Be With session, I was in the office for the chocolate chip cookie agreement, the 10-hour agreement that I had with him. But I've never stepped back in the office. I've been outside the office, but the office it's like his fortress of solitude that occasionally he lets people come into. Like it's a sacred place because of what happens there. And so I stepped into that with this, it's like the rug had been pulled out from under me of this projection of who I thought I was. and and we got right into the complaints I had about life, and the ways that I had related to people and things, and the stories that I had lived into as though they were reality. Bless you. And and it turned out that I I discovered that what had happened to me in life and what I had made it mean, I had conflated those two things, and I was relating to my story as reality, not as a story about reality, which, was evident from the way I showed up there. I mean, inauthenticity from a certain perspective is an unwillingness to tell the truth about what really happened.
Hmm.
It's projecting what you think should have happened, or with a story that I had about what happened, or showing up um, committed to that this version of things is really what happened, as opposed to being with the reality of just what was. So yeah, not sure how clear that was, but that's about as far as I can go with that particular question, Daniel.
Well, that's great, and I'm with you. And you also mentioned how Steve strongly encouraged you to get into landmark education, and you took that suggestion and you went into it. And I also had a good part of my upbringing, so to speak, in landmark, and they were really in that system. They're masters at teaching the distinction that you just spoke about, which is, hey, there's what happened, and then there's the story we tell about it. And of course, there's lots of ways that we can come to that realization and learning. And it is when those get conflated that we start to live through all these filters, and we're not seeing reality. We're seeing our own stories often, which don't serve us. So
Mhm.
I think part of what you described is that experience with Steve was really like a moment of starting to separate that for you in a way that touched you deeply. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely fair. Yeah, well
Yeah.
said.
And I think there's something else that's really key to point out here, which is the world of coaching, I think, is still largely misunderstood. It's still in many ways a new field, and for me, I can say genuinely, I've been working as a coach for almost 30 years. However,
Mhm.
the first 20 years of doing that, I would not call myself a coach because I had judgments about coaching, and I heard, people calling themselves life coaches, and I looked at their life and their modeling, and I was like, well, that's not the coaching I want, right? So but then for me, what changed was when I met Tony Robbins and I saw the way he worked with people one on one in a group and the profound difference that he made in people's lives. And I was like, oh, so that's what coaching is about, or that's what's possible with it. And then as I've met Steve in the ways that I've met him, Steve Hardison, and seen the difference that he makes in people, it's 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 amazing. It's phenomenal, and it is really, on a par or maybe beyond the value of the highest professions that we can imagine. Like, what are the professions that what did my mother want for me to be? A doctor or a lawyer? That either one of those would have been okay. You could be
Mhm.
anything you want as long as it's a doctor or a lawyer. But really, now I look at it, I'm like, wow, mom, I wish you could see now. And I guess, wherever she is, she can see that what we do as coaches, is as valuable or maybe more valuable. So I'm curious, this is a long lead into a question to you, because you had such a profound experience as a recipient of coaching from Steve Hardison, or as a co-creator in that process, is probably more honest. And I know you've made a profound difference in so many people's lives through the coaching work you do. And I'm with you. That's what counts. It doesn't matter if you've got a certification. What matters is, can you actually help people? Can you help them to change their lives? So, what would you say? Like, because it's still a little bit baffling, even for me. I think for a lot of people, how does that happen in just having a conversation with someone, right? Just talking, yet their life can change, miracles can happen. What gives? How does that work?
Boy, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And the words kind of fail us here. Like the term life coach, when I hear that, I think of somebody that took a $7 certification and put on a webinar, or went through something that turned out to be almost like a multi-level coaching sort of a deal. And it doesn't inspire. What does inspire are the stories that I have from people that I've worked with, and myself. So I don't know how you put a value on peace of mind. I don't know how you put a value on freedom from trauma. I don't know how you put a value on living life and being excited to get up in the morning. I'm not sure what value you put on loving and being discovering newly every day your relationship with your family member or your daughter or your son or your spouse or your parents when you knew that they were a certain way, and all of a sudden after a few conversations you discover that this story that you had about them has nothing to do with them and everything to do with the projection and the things that you made up about them over here with you. To be free of of judgment about or condemnation about somebody who believes or sees differently from you. Some of the people that I've worked with, their children are have come out as gay or lesbian or LGBTQ, whatever, right? And my daughter did that and is that, and she's married to her wife, and we love them. We were able to throw their wedding for them, and it took something because that was not where I came from. I'm so grateful for the work I did, such that when my daughter received a letter from a loving grandparent that didn't feel very loving to her, we were able to. She brought it to me. It's like, Dad, what am I supposed to do with this? And what came was, sweetie, the way to look at this is your grandparent is expressing their love to you in the language that is available to them. And she got that. So there was no rift in it. There was no 20-year FU in their relationship. And what a blessing, And so for people to have the experience of discovering the humanity and the value of others, the love of others, not the knowing already who they are and putting them in a box and then everything that they say sounds like Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. To be able to listen newly to a person it's a beautiful gift. To be able to let go of trauma that, this is really strange. A lot of people that have come to me in the last, that I've worked with in the last several years have had, difficult sexual trauma, and to be able to have them be at peace and to be able to forgive themselves and others for the situations that happened that they were not at fault in any way, shape, or form, but to have peace of those self-judgments and to fall in love with themselves and to be able to forgive the perpetrator, or as I call him, the purple trader, that had, generally speaking, hurt people. So to have grace for that which is unforgivable is a tremendous gift. And it's not like it's me, Daniel. That's the thing. My method is I connect with the divine. I connect with this person who's I'm working with, and we do what Spirit says to do. We go where it says to go. It's not predictable. I don't have a method that I walk people through. Now, I have distinctions, thank goodness for Landmark and all the other distinctions and methodologies that I have in LP, you name it, Site K, tapping, I'll use them all when they're appropriate. And sometimes we don't use any of them. Sometimes we just feel what's there. We fill this person up with love. We help them discover their own value and sit in this place until they are, from the tip of their head to the bottom of their feet, loving themselves. And then we can feel whatever needs to be felt to release whatever emotional baggage or whatever emotional blocks they've experienced. And some of them scare the crap out of me. I mean, I thought I had a rough life. Boy, I have had a fantastic and easy journey, comparatively speaking, to some of the people that I've worked with. So yeah, again, kind of a long answer to a short question, but there you go. Oh, you're muted, Daniel.
Thank you. Yes, I love what you said. Is a perfect response, and I'm with you. There's as much as I love what happens in coaching when I'm a recipient and when I'm working as a coach, and because I'm intellectually curious also and always wanting to improve. So part of me is monitoring and examining and saying, how does that work? How do these miracles happen? And part of it you really, I think, clearly pointed to is We can't know because it's from the great mystery. It's coming, it's spirit doing the work. And you pointed to another part, which is part of it is the work you've done to learn to love yourself, right? And you spoke about that earlier in a really beautiful way. And as we come to love ourselves more and more, then we are automatically loving other people also. And so there's another ingredient in this coaching dynamic, which is it is love that comes through. And another ingredient you brought forward is there are distinctions. And I have a program that I run, a multi-day event, a little bit like Landmark Forum, and part of the way I define it is it's the missing owner's manual. It's certainly the one I didn't get when I was a kid, and my
Mhm.
parents, bless them, they were doing the best they can, but they had ways of thinking about and seeing the world that just created pain, right? It just created suffering. Not their fault. It's what they learned from before. It's what they saw. They were just doing the best they could. But it really is the case that certain thoughts and thought patterns lead to pain. You're about to say something, I think. Is that true?
No,
No,
I'm just
okay.
listening. Please go ahead. Yeah.
All right, all right. So, thank goodness for the beautiful mystery that this individual path of coaching is, and that we, get to be the recipients of and the practitioners of stuff that really makes a profound difference in people's lives. And I'm with you, it's hard to quantify sometimes what the impact is and what the benefits are. Let's rewind for a minute though, because if you're willing, I'd love to for you to share more with our audience about this time in your life where you've been cruising along, and you'd built up a certain amount of identity, as I understood it from what you said before, in terms of who you were based on this role or this job. And maybe I don't know. I'm wondering. I could imagine if I were in your shoes, and I've been in similar shoes before, that there's a factor of like my income can also define something of my confidence or my identity. And you said you lost a lot of those pieces for a time. And hey, I love what you said. You tried to pray your way out. You tried to work out your way out. You tried to get out. And Steve said to you, well, you can count on the fact that I'm not going to wave a magic wand and get you out. Right. That's not what a coach does. I'm with you. We're not, like over here, or, doing something to people. However, the experience you had with him was impactful. So would you say more about just, what that journey was for you, what it meant, and how you shifted?
Yeah. Yeah. So the beauty of this situation was, and the reason I'm so grateful for having gone through that, is that it gave me compassion, deep compassion for people who are going through mental health issues or who have them, and addiction. I've experienced that, you know. Uh, didn't mention trying to, you know, act out my way out of depression, but that definitely happened, right? Um, all these things came together for my good. They gave me experience that I didn't know I needed to be able to relate to people in a way that was loving and non-judgmental and non-condemnation. Like, I don't condemn people. Now, so far as I can tell, we all judge people, right? My statement is I don't condemn.
Hmm.
I can't help but evaluate people based on what I'm seeing and noticing, but I have a choice about whether I condemn them. And this experience of uh, of loss of identity, and it was like, well perceived, by the way, well discerned. It was a lot about how much I was making. It was a lot that I was an international businessman. Woohoo! You know, and I still take great joy. Like, I've been to China 13 times. I've been to, gosh, now 22 countries around the world, and I love it. I love traveling. I grew up in a very small town in rural Idaho that's not so small now. There's a university there that my daughter's about to graduate from, and my son-in-law. And my parents still live there. But I thought I was in the middle of nowhere, and that was the reality that I was living into. I couldn't see all the people that were coming to this, in those days, college, that I had the opportunity to interact with people from all over the world. It was totally blind. I was like, I'm in a small farming town in Idaho. There's nothing here, and life is boring and very dull and dark, you know. But that became the reality I was living from during the Depression years. Also, there's something about Western culture and culture in general where if I am not providing for my family, what value do I as a man have? Now, I didn't know how deeply I had bought into that identity until for the first time in my life I was asking for help from church, government, and family for, the basics. And I was so ashamed. You know, I was perfectly happy to give, but to receive? What are you, nuts? My job's to create and give. My job is not to receive. And that is another beautiful thing that I got from that experience. I learned how to receive to a certain extent. And there's this giving and receiving. It's a dance. If we can only give and can never receive, we're stuck. I was stuck. It was painful as all get out to learn to be willing to receive because I had no other choice, right? And what a great divine setup for somebody who wants to help people learn how to receive and how to love themselves and how to love others. So that giving up that identity, and I had to grieve for it. It's a strange thing to grieve for my job, to grieve for who I thought I was. One of the books that I love is this book, Beautiful Tragedy by Judy Thurston, talking about when the loss of her son, Jacob, who's also known as, his artist name was Hella Sketchy. But as I read that book, I'm like, these are the steps of grief that I went through for my identity as it died and went away, and I had to create myself newly. And like I said, even after working with Steve, I created this first iteration of my document with him, and it was beautiful. And it took me, I had to find a job. I was coaching, but I wasn't coaching full time during that time. And who would want a coach who's depressed and couldn't drag themselves out of bed for a couple months? That's not all that inspiring of a life. Talk about a life coach. Yeah, sign me up for some of that. Are you kidding me? No way. But I had clients that I'd helped enough that they stuck with me. It was beautiful. I'm so grateful for them. But it took me 6 months after getting a job, a 9 to 5, 7 to 4, whatever it was, job before I finally came out of this automatic heavy cloud that I call depression, and that was my personal experience of it. And I relate to myself now as a receiver and a giver. I give and I receive, and I'm willing to receive. Sometimes I forget that. By the way, here's a pro tip. Whenever you see Steve Hardison and he offers you something, say yes. Say thank you, please, thank you. This is the proper terminology. Receive what he or the universe is willing to give you and wanting to give you. One of the things that he says that is kind of from our belief system, it's from our scripture, is that God wants to give you 100-fold. For everything you give out, he wants to give you 1,000-fold. He'd give you 10,000-fold if you're willing to receive it. And that's my perspective. Whatever your belief system is, the universe, I'm not attached to that. I am totally okay with you believing or not believing, whatever you want to. And this principle of receiving is an eternal, universal principle, so far as I can tell. So, yeah, again, not sure I answered the question you asked, but that's where we went.
That's the perfect place to go. And I'll echo with a quick story what you said about receiving. So I had an experience similar in a way years ago. I won't tell the story now, but where I sort of lost, at least from one perspective, everything overnight. And it was my country of residence, all my stuff, my job, my business, my money, my reputation. Worst of all, I had a 9-year-old daughter at the time. Our dog we lost also. And coming out of that, many gifts coming out of it. Not that I was able to recognize all of them immediately. one of the gifts that came out of it similarly was learning how to receive. And there's this crystal moment that changed things for me. This is going back not that many long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I had some friends over for dinner, and I love having dinner parties and making all the food and serving people. And like you, I've been more comfortable in the giving role, in the hosting role. And after dinner, my friend Jules, she says, "Oh, let me clean, do some of those dishes." And I was like, "No, no, 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 it's okay, I got it." And she's like, "No, I'd like to do it." And like complete reflex, unconscious in me, I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." And then such a beautiful moment. She looks around at the room. There were like two other people in the kitchen at the time. And she goes, "This guy really has a problem with receiving, huh?" And it was just like, and she wasn't condemning me or judging me in it. And so I was able to receive it, receive her comment. And I got it. And I was like, wow, gosh, I wonder where else that's showing up in my life. Right. It's not just somebody helping me with the dishes. So I made a rule for myself, like to unwind my own pattern, which was from that moment on, if somebody offers me something, unless it's like a kick in the teeth, I'll pass on that. But if somebody offers me something that I genuinely would want or would benefit from, I have to say yes, right? That's just the fundamental rule. And it's still hard for me sometimes. Like, just the other day I encountered it. Somebody offered me something and I was just ready to, I was like, I felt out of balance. I'm like, they're giving too much. And now I'm thank you. Yes, thank you. I received that. And there's this great, and I'm with you. It is a law of the universe. And I haven't thought of this in years, actually. There's a beautiful body of therapeutic work called Family Constellations, right? And really amazing stuff. Bert Hellinger, a Austrian therapist, magician guy, created this system. And when I discovered it, I was blown away by how powerful it was. And so he has this huge book called The Hidden Symmetry of Love. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And so I consumed the whole book. And one of the things he said early on in that, and I think this is going to resonate for you, Dave. Early on, he said, there is this automatic symmetry. And the way it works, law of the universe, is if one person gives to the other from a place of love, right? It's different if they're giving because they're trying to get something. But if they give from a place of love, right, that will put the relationship out of balance. And so the other person will automatically give back out of love. However, if they don't do that, the relationship will be out of balance and it will feel asymmetrical. And this person will then find a way to pull this person down, right? Which when I learned that, I was like, huh, how does that work? And then I've seen it play out time and time again. Fascinating. So that it is a law of the universe, this giving and receiving. And it's not about any belief system or religion or anything. It's just like in the physical universe, gravity is a thing. In the greater universe, this reciprocity is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, all right. Well, we are cooking along here and time is flying by. So let's go back to something else you said earlier, because I'm not sure that everybody is hip to this conversation yet in a way. And that is, we've spoken a bit about Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach, in the book, and you mentioned the being movement, and you very nicely gave a sort of expanded understanding for people about what does it mean being, right? And so this being movement, and I don't know what would you say in terms of what it is, how you relate to it, why it's important to you?
Yeah, well, so the being movement came out of this book that was um, researched by Alan Thompson and then written by Amy Hardison, Steve Hardison's wife, who's I love her works. I have a couple of her other books as well. But this book has created a community around it. And part of the communities started off on Facebook. And Eric Lofholm was the guy that started the Facebook page just as an act of service. And he's committed the rest of his life to forwarding the action of being and managing those groups. At one point in oh goodness, around January, February of 2021, when it was a month or two after he started this group, he got put in Facebook jail. And he had been putting out these things, who are you being? Today I'm being this, and would respond to things like that. He got put in Facebook jail, which means he couldn't post anymore for a while, for a few days, like 7 days. I'm like, I gotta help him out. So I jumped in and I just had this nudge to, I'm like, I'm his lieutenant. I'm gonna be the one who's helping him out. And when he heard that, he laughed. He's like, I didn't know I needed a lieutenant. But I've been able to be of service there. And I discovered this deep love of acknowledging the divine greatness in others. And I am one of the things that Steve has called me, one of the things that Ankush Jain has called me, and I've called Ankush Jain the same thing, is a master of acknowledgement. And he is, and I am. We are that, you know. And it doesn't take long to find a reason or to find the divine in others, the divine greatness that is worthy of acknowledgement. And Daniel, I mean, you've got it. It's got it coming out of your ears, you know. and exactly. And I acknowledge you for having this Art of Vibrant Living show. I acknowledge you for the difference you make in the lives of others. I acknowledge you for doing the deep, hard, difficult things that have got you to where you are. And I acknowledge you for your humanity, you know, for having grace for yourself and others, because one of the artifacts of humanity is, one of the facets of humanity is, we make mistakes. We screw up. I screw up and I love me. I couldn't sleep last night and I turned on Gaia and I love me. And I, you know, you're on your show and I love you. And, you know, I saw this thing, I'm like, is Daniel trying to harvest my list of people? And I love you. I have that thought, you know, and you're doing whatever you're doing. And it's of service. And you know, the little meaning making machine, thank you, Landmark, for that particular distinction, that's going on in the background is always going on. And I can choose to believe it and pretend that those thoughts are real and condemn or say, you know, write people off, or I can be curious and discover what's actually going on there. And the beauty of this way of being is that it's available and it's contagious. The being movement is a contagious place where, instead of contagion being something that's bad or wrong, COVID, oh gosh, you know, beingness is a contagious state where, if I elevate my beingness, if I choose to be a certain way, and that informs my actions, that's the source of my actions. And I don't have to be perfect in a particular way. Perfect meaning I'm always doing exactly what I say I'm going to do, or live from my document, my constitution, that from which I am made up. If I don't perform it perfectly all the time, I still get to have grace for myself, and it still changes who I am and who I'm being and the impact that I am in the world. So beingness, this being movement, this opportunity to choose who I be, gives me conscious handles or controllers on my life. I'm being forgiving. If I am forgiven, peaceful, free, and connected, and I show up in the world like that, it doesn't mean that I won't get ticked off when some driver pulls in front of me and slams on their brakes. It may not even mean that I don't flip them off and say some choice words, but it also means that I forgive them rapidly and I send them blessings. And I remember that this is a meditation and that I'm being challenged every once in a while by the universe or God to say, are you really committed to being who you say you are? And yes, and I get to clean it up and I forgive myself and I love me. And I love the divine comedy and the humanity in others. And I love me. So this being movement is very much in the realm of discovering this difficult to describe. In fact, if you describe it and kind of put it in a box, it's a sign that you have missed the point. You know, it's almost defies description. This state of and creation of being, because if you describe it, it's almost like the Tao. You know, that which you can describe, that ain't it. So I'm not sure what you heard in that, but I'd love to hear your version of that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's beautiful. There is many gold nuggets in what you shared there, and one of the things that I take from that, you use the word contagious, and I think of the term from physics, which is entrainment, right? And entrainment means that any two bodies, thoughts, any two energetics that are in proximity, and that can be physical or just thought proximity, will align to the same vibration. And one of the coolest experiences I ever had with this was when I was living in Seattle. It had to be more than 20 years ago. Eckhart Tolle, right, great spiritual teacher, had just emerged on the street on the scene. The Power of Now had just come out. I had heard of him maybe a month before. I didn't really know much, but he was giving a talk downtown Seattle. I went all by myself. Big church, amazing church, like 500 people in there. And I'm sitting in the back. I don't know anybody. I'm looking around, and he hadn't started yet, and the whole place was like just as everybody was chattering, and this guy. And if you've never seen Eckhart Tolle, he's quite a interesting physical specimen. He's kind of a very unassuming small guy, a little bit round shouldered, and he's got this kind of quirky face. And I'm because I'm alone and I'm not talking to anybody, and I can see everybody's chattering and hanging out, and I'm way in the back, but I see him enter the stage from stage left, and he
Mhm.
walks across the stage, and it's a really simple stage. It was just a chair and a table and a microphone, and he walks across the stage slowly, sits down in the chair, and then he looks from one side of the audience to the other side at about one-fifth that speed, and the whole place went from like "Ah," to like became still. And he said something in that talk. He said, if you don't understand English, you'll probably get even more out of this conversation. And I remember like, "Oh, that's such a funny thing to say in so many ways." But what I got was like, it's the energy of it more than the content or the words. And
Mhm.
so a lot of what I think goes on is when you do the work to be able to love yourself, to forgive yourself, right? And as a practice, it's maybe never done. We don't know, but that you stay committed to that, then there's a frequency to that. There's a vibration to that. And so whenever you're around somebody else, you're aligning to that. You're raising other people up, and that's really powerful and beautiful. I love there's a quotation by Bhagwan Rajneesh years ago that said, the purpose of all of our education is to learn to love more, right? And like, ooh, that's different from my secondary school education. That's different from when I got in college. I, I like that though. That's
Mhm.
really good. And I wrote a book on spiritual leadership, and so as part of that, I tried to define, well, what does that mean? My goodness, what does it mean, spiritual leadership? What does spiritual even mean? And the metrics I came up with for what does spiritual mean, one of the two key metrics is it's one's ability to love themselves, to be comfortable with themselves.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily an easy task, right?
Mhm.
Because we've learned lots of ways of judging or condemning ourselves and others. So to unwind that, to forgive, to love, it sounds simple, and it even sounds small as I say it, at least compared to the immensity and the importance that it is. So I really commend you, not condemn, commend you for making that a part of your practice, and also have for the humility and authenticity to say, yeah, and I screw it up, and sometimes I get pissed off on the road, um, but I come back. As soon as I can, I come back, and I come back to the truth of blessings and love.
Thank you. Thank you. I love what you said about Eckhart Tolle. I have a hard time listening to his stuff. I read his words and I'm utterly inspired. And when I listen to him, it's hard for me to pay attention. Like his voice almost shuts off ability to hear or to listen, right? And it's funny because Wayne Dyer is exactly the opposite.
Hmm.
I like reading one. I've enjoyed reading one of Wayne Dyer's books, and I love listening to him. Like his Secrets of the Power of Intention was my favorite. That's one of my favorite things to listen to. I've listened to it probably 15 times over my life, and it's a hefty course, but oh, so moving. Um, but this presence you're talking about, the presence, I am on my second time through a book called The Way of Mastery, and I'm the nudge was to take others with me. So I've made a little private group in Facebook that I get together once a week with anybody that wants to show up, and we talk through what's showing up with for us at whatever chapter we're on, whatever lesson we're on. And one of the things that it mentions in there is your presence. At a certain level, when you connect to your divine greatness, when you connect to the the Christ consciousness in you, you have presence. I have presence. We walk into a room and people will feel that, and it's not because we're so great, but it is because that we are connected to and love ourselves and therefore them as well. And that's self with a capital S, universal self. That one you were talking about earlier, you mentioned it in passing. I love that. And I wanted to point out one other book that has made an enormous difference for me in this realm of self-love. And it's called The Gentle Art of Blessing by Pierre Pradervand. I have given that book away to so many people, and I love it for myself. And it's simply it's a very simple practice of discovering this skill of desiring from the bottom of your soul good things for other people.
Hmm.
Health, wealth, well-being, a great sex life, fantastic relationships with all their family, including the ones that have cut them off from any sort of communication, forgiveness for that which has happened in life. And that has been a real powerful key for me. The other book that has been just fantastic for me in this realm is called Loyalty to Your Soul.
Hmm.
And it's by the people over at the University of Santa Monica, the Holnicks, the doctors Holnick.
The Doctor's Molnick. Yes.
And oh my goodness, just the way that they take you through these principles and distinctions of self-forgiveness and self-love. I am forever indebted to them for the work that they have done in that arena. And I've listened to that book. I like to listen to books and read them, but if I can do both, that's fantastic. But that one I've listened to probably 20 times.
Wow.
And to have the experience of being the presence of the divine or being one with the presence of the divine, you know, I I spoke in church a few months ago, and I went out there and I don't know if Eckhart totally did this or not. When he looked across the crowd, I have this idea that what he was saying is, I love you, 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 I love you. I had this opportunity to speak in church, about 300 people. And usually, and I'm very comfortable speaking in church. I love to talk in church. We get to talk about spirit and the difference that makes in our life, and the difference that being connected with Christ it makes in our lives. And this time I didn't prepare anything.
Hmm.
And that's very not my past experience. But I went
Hmm.
up and I sat on the stand and I went through the entire congregation. I love you. I love you. I love you. There are a few
Hmm.
people I had to do a little bit of forgiveness cycle so that I could then love them.
Yeah.
Because familiarity can breed contempt in some cases. And I did that, and I stood up and I spoke, and I don't remember what I said, Daniel,
Hmm.
but from a certain perspective, it wasn't me speaking.
Hmm.
It was that presence, that lovingness that was speaking. And I got to experience that as being the one through whom that was spoken.
Hmm.
What a miracle. What a miracle.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. What are you hearing in that? And or where else would you like to take this conversation?
Well, unfortunately, we are up against the clock.
Sorry.
So, and you made a great segue for us a moment. I love what you said, and I could reflect back and respond to a lot of that. It's beautiful, and I think it's a great place for us to leave it, which is, in some way, it's loving and allowing for spirit to flow through, and that's beautiful, and beautiful that you had that experience and created that experience for 300 different people. And you mentioned earlier about The Way of Mastery, which is a book I love also, and that you have a group that you're working with people on that. So that brought the question for me, for members of our audience who are interested in learning more about you, connecting with you, working with you, what's the best way for them to be in touch with you?
Right. Well, if you'd like to join the Facebook group, I've got one for the Way of Mastery and one for A Course in Miracles. Just send me a message in Facebook if you'd like to. And if you'd like to have a conversation, you can visit my website and set up a time with me, and we'll just have a connection call. And that website is DaveOrtonCoaching.com. And
Dave Orton, DaveOrton.
TON.
TON.com. Right. Perfect.
DaveOrtonCoaching.com. Yeah.
Dave Orton Coaching. DaveOrton Coaching.com. Yes, we
Yeah.
got it. Perfect. Well, Dave, goodness gracious, it would we could talk for another 2 hours and it would be fun and valuable. And I'm so grateful for this time that we have had. I'm so grateful for the work that you've done to evolve in your life and to face yourself and learn to love yourself, and the work you're doing that's benefiting so many other people, in the being movement, through the Way of Mastery, through your coaching work, through just who you are. It's super inspiring, beautiful. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you for the difference you make in the world. I see that. I see you. I appreciate
Very
you.
kind. Thank you. All right. And for y'all, our audience, our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And not only for tuning in and spending this time with us, which is a gift for us, thank you for being not just interested in, but actually so motivated to create your life into a masterpiece that you're investing the most precious thing ever, which is your time, right? And your energy, your attention. And please, please, please take something, at least one thing that you've learned from Dave in this show, and apply it in your life, put it into action so that you can even more make your life a masterpiece. Thanks so much, y'all. See you for an amazing show coming up very soon next week. In fact, with Amy Hardison, who was mentioned earlier in this show. See y'all soon. Aloha. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.